Welcome back to the Broadman Word, and we are continuing to look at the life of Saul, which just sadly just kind of is just spiraling. And we looked at last time just the darkness that the obsession over David has caused in the life of Saul. Well, that continues. And so let's look at First Samuel chapter 23. First Samuel chapter 23. But there's something interesting in this one that I really want to point out. We're going to be looking at verses 15 through 29, but to give a little bit of context, David has gone to a city called Keilah and has helped rescue the inhabitants of that city from the Philistines. And it is told Saul that David is in Keilah, and he sees it as almost like a victory that he's there. Look at First Samuel chapter 23. Look at verse, let's see, that is verse 7. Now it was told Saul that David had come to Keilah. And Saul said, God has given him into my hand, for he has shut himself in by entering a town that has gates and bars. Interesting because God never actually tells Saul to go after David ever. Yet David asks the Lord if he is to go and help the people of Keilah earlier in the chapter. And then he asks the Lord if he is supposed to escape from Keilah as well in case he gets caught by Saul. And the Lord answers him specifically. So it's interesting to see the difference between these two gentlemen. You have Saul that thinks the Lord is guiding him when that's definitely not the case. And then you have David, who is actually in communication with God and knows that the Lord is asking him to do what he is supposed to do, and he follows through with it. So I think that is really, really interesting to see. And I think it's also interesting as well how this wraps up, which then leads into our section today, or the immediate context. Verse 14. And David remained in the strongholds in the wilderness, in the hill country of the wilderness of Ziph. And Saul sought him every day, but David did not. But God did not give him being David, into his being Saul's hand. So it's interesting to see that even with all this obsession, it is truly all in the mind and heart of Saul because God is actively protecting David from Saul. So now we get to our section for today, verse 15. David saw that Saul had come out to seek his life. David was in the wilderness of Ziph at Horesh. And Jonathan, Saul's son, rose and went to David at Horesh and strengthened his hand in God. And he said to him, Do not fear, for the hand of Saul my father shall not find you. You shall be king over Israel, and I shall be next to you. Saul my father also knows this. And the two of them made a covenant before the Lord. David remained at Horesh, and Jonathan went home. So you have this, again, this meeting between Jonathan and David, and Jonathan is now truly convinced that one, his dad is being crazy about this, even though we already talked about that before. But more so this time is that David is to be king, and that Jonathan will not get in the way of that at all. He will be next to him. So don't get me wrong, that is still a very privileged place to be at, to be next to the king. But he is not the king, and he's not trying to be at all. And I think that's really interesting. But then he also says, Saul, my father, also knows this. So that really gives us insight into the mind and the heart of Saul, which we've already seen before. Is he obsessed and is he worried about David taking the throne? Yes, he is. And Jonathan has just confirmed that in verse 17, at the end of verse 17. But this covenant is made between the two of them that David is going to be king, that Jonathan will not stop that at all, and instead will actually help him to the point where he will be right next to him when David becomes king. But now, verse 19. Then the Ziphites went up to Saul at Gibeah, saying, Is not David hiding amongst us in the strongholds at Horesh, on the hill of Hachilah, which is south of Jeshimon? Now come down, O king, according to all your heart's desire to come down, and our part shall be to surrender him into the king's hand. And Saul said, May you be blessed by the Lord, for you have had compassion on me. Go, make yet more sure. Know and see the place where his foot is, and who has seen him there, for it is told me that he is very cunning. That's we'll get to that in just a second. Let's finish up here. Verse 23. See therefore and take note of all the lurking places where he hides, and come back to me with sure information. Then I will go with you, and if he is in the land, I will search him out among all the thousands of Judah. And they arose and went to Ziph ahead of Saul. So, a couple things. First off, you had the Ziphites that are more than happy to give up David, probably because of fear of Saul, possibly as well. But there is just a clear they're more than happy to give up David, and his response is just it's just very telling. Verse 21, May you be blessed by the Lord, for you have had compassion on me. First off, it doesn't really show compassion. It's more just like, hey, we don't want you to be mad at us, Saul, in case you ever found out that David was in our land of Ziph. So therefore, we're just going to tattletale and turn this guy over because we actually fear you. But Saul takes that as compassion, which again just shows you the state of his mind, which is just so far gone when it comes to this obsession with David. But the other thing is he loves to attach the Lord's name to the things that he says and the things that he does. And why is that? I think for him, it's so. I think it goes back to the culture that he has grown up in and he's from, which is a Jewish culture. He believes that because he is Jewish and because he comes from the tribe of Benjamin, which then, of course, is a son of Jacob, he believes that that the Lord must be with him. Which, of course, you would say, well, isn't David from the line of Judah, who also is a son of Jacob? Yes. And so this point really makes no sense at all. But again, it shows you the heart of Saul and his lack of spiritual walk with the Lord. He believes that the Lord is making this way for him, even though it's never worked before the other times that he's tried to kill David and pursue him. And so it reeks of just a lack of a spiritual walk with the Lord. It reeks of just not understanding anything that's going on around him, seeing compassion when it's probably more just a response of fear on the people of Ziph, of the king, of Saul. So I think it's just that. By the way, I did chuckle a little bit there at the end of verse 22 when it says, For it is told me that he is very cunning. It's told you. Are you kidding me? You've seen that he is very good at dodging the way. Again, it's because the Lord is with him, but Saul does not want to admit that, or he just refuses to admit that. And so, he just doesn't want to admit it. But yeah, it's very, very strange that he does this. And I think it's because he wants to believe that he is in the good graces of God when he's clearly not. So, picking up to wrap up in the end of verse 24. Now, David and his men were in the wilderness of Maon, in the Arabah to the south of Jeshimon. And Saul and his men went to seek him. And David was told, so he went down to the rock and lived in the wilderness of Maon. When Saul heard that, he pursued after David in the wilderness of Maon. Saul went on one side of the mountain, David and his men on the other side of the mountain, and David was hurrying to get away from Saul. As Saul and his men were crossing in on David and his men to capture them, a messenger came to Saul, saying, "Hurry and come, for the Philistines have made a raid against the land." So Saul returned from pursuing after David and went against the Philistines. Therefore that place was called the Rock of Escape. And David went up from there and lived in the strongholds of En-gedi. So you have this back and forth just kind of chase between David and Saul, but it ends because the Philistines have attacked Israel. It just says the land. It doesn't say a specific city that the Philistines have attacked. But clearly the Philistines are no joke, especially with the history of Israel and specifically in the book of First Samuel that we're in. And so Saul does not take it lightly, and so he stops the chase. I personally, even though that it says, and the Lord caused the Philistines to raid against the land, it doesn't say that, but I absolutely believe that the Lord allowed the Philistines to raid the land in order to distract Saul and to allow David to get away. So I think there absolutely, again, is this idea that the Lord is behind the future kingship of David, which then, of course, leads to his escapes from Saul. And that is actually where we are going next. So next week, we are going to look at not just one, but two times that David spares the life of Saul. So we will get into that next week. But thanks for spending a little bit of time with me today as we continue to look a little bit again at the spiraling of the life of King Saul. But I will see you next week. Thanks.